Welcome to Applying Audit Rules Getting Started. The three of us presenting come from different areas of SAP Concur with different levels of expertise on the topic of audit rules. My name is Sondra Glynn, and I've been with Concur for just a few days shy of 27 years. I work in the Concur Audit Services team, primarily on the Intelligent Audit and Verify services, which are connected to but not exactly the same thing as the system audit rules. And I'm here today with Tammy and Tammy to talk about getting started with configuring and applying your system audit rules.
Hi, and I am Tammy Noyes. I've been with SAP Concur for 14 years, and I'm a business process principal consultant in Concur Services, working on premium expense implementations. I am also the SAP Concur WalkMe program manager, implementing custom WalkMe on SAP Concur. In my prior life to SAP, I was working on another company where I implemented Concur and was their Concur admin for giving me over 25 years Concur experience.
And I'm Tammy E.G. I have been with SAP Concur for almost 7 years. I'm a senior solution advisor, and what that means is I assist clients with maximizing their solutions. Prior to coming here, I was a client. I implemented their Concur program. I was also their Concur administrator for travel, expense, and corporate card program. I was also their auditor and processor, so pretty much all things Concur. And I always like to joke and say that I'm bilingual. I can speak Concurian and client, because we know there's definitely a difference.
Absolutely. So pop quiz, everybody. Take out a pencil, piece of paper. I'm kind of old school that way. Problem number one. If a train leaves Seattle, headed south at 60 miles an hour, and another train leaves Los Angeles, headed north at 85 miles an hour, where do they meet up? Where do they crash? I'm just kidding. I always hated those types of word problems when I was a kid, but I wanted you to positively think about audit rules as a math equation and what problems that they can solve for you. Now, I took, and I failed, calculus twice back in my high school and college days. Don't figure out how long ago that was. But I do really enjoy math and the logic of it all.
Well, I didn't even take calculus. So.
Good choice.
Now, I like math as well, Sondra, but I also avoided calculus, Tammy. However, I did take statistics, and my professor made it really simple for us. He gave us a sheet that laid out the different types of statistical problems we'd be working on and which formula to use for each one. Now, I aced the class. However, don't get too excited. I had absolutely no clue why I was doing what I was doing. I was just going off the sheet they told me to. But I just knew that was the right way to do it. And that's what we're going to do in this session today. We're going to walk you through all the basics of how to create an audit rule. So where can you find them? What do they do? How can you configure them? And when do you want to use them? And then we're going to sprinkle in some polls and have some time at the end for some, as we wrap up, we'll go ahead and do some of those housekeeping slides. So audit rules ensure compliance and accuracy by identifying and correcting issues before an expense report is even submitted. They do act as a training tool as well, and then they're helping users adhere to company policies and be able to submit cleaner and more accurate expense reports. And this proactive approach not only streamlines your processes, but it also fosters a culture of accountability and precision.
Absolutely. So where can you find those audit rules within the expense solution? You're just going to follow the simple path. Go home, go to your administration, go to expense, go to audit rules. Now this screen may look slightly different based upon your role or your expense platform, but this will get you to that starting point of the audit rule equation. Now let's talk about what types of audit rules there are and what they can do for your organization.
So the first one is validation rules. They can be configured to take place on report save or submit, entry save or submit, allocation save, or post submission. Validation rules can be an audit rule on steroids and throw an exception. If you have a lot of conditions in a regular audit rule, you may want to think about creating a file with data to upload to the table and use the validation rule instead. Validation rules can also be used to update fields. If field 1 contains ABC and field 2 contains XYZ, populate field 3 with DEF.
Yeah, Validation rules are super cool. I don't use them nearly enough. Random audit rules allows for auditing of expense reports, either a percentage of reports selected, setting at 10%, then 10%. Every report has a 10% chance of being selected or tagged for audit. Or as a sequential number of reports, for example, like every 5th report will get submitted, gets tagged for auditing. The percentage-based rule, kind of like that math stuff, it's based on averages. In the long term, the desired percentage of the reports will be audited. In the short term, the actual percentage of reports might be slightly more or less. Random audit rules are my favorite, unlike calculus, differential equations, because they commonly apply to the Concur Audit Service of Intelligent Audit and Verify, where I kind of spend most of my days. But they absolutely can be used for internal auditing and routing of expense reports as well. And you can have different random selections based upon your different employee groups just by using the applies to option. So maybe you want 10% of your US group, 50% of your UK group, or 100% globally. It all works.
Now the next one, which we're really going to spend a lot of time on today, is our custom audit rules. And these, if we're thinking of them in the math terms, are really going to be essentially an if-then statement. So that if a certain condition is met, then an exception would be created. So an example of that is you can go ahead and create an audit rule that we would call a red flag or a hard stop. And this would stop the report from being submitted unless the condition is corrected. So in this example, if there is fuel that's present on a rental car receipt, you could require a comment, right? Maybe you're supposed to fill it before returning your car. So for that comment to be added, once the employee adds it, the submitter adds it, it will go ahead and clear that red flag and allow for that expense report to now be submitted. So how do you create custom audit rules? Like any good equation, there's going to be some steps that need to be completed, which we're going to be showing you throughout our presentation today. So to start with, we'd like you to know there are 39 systemic audit rules that are pre-configured within the system at this time. Now these can be used as is right out of the box, or you can also customize them to fit your policy or your needs. So some of these examples of what we have already configured is airfare limit, airfare preferred vendor, amount due employee. There's a fuel meal limit type rules in there already, a duplicate ticket number, which I found really helpful and used quite often when I was an admin. And then there's a travel forced match between e-receipt, travel, and card data. So this is just to name a few of those 39. And remember, again, these can all be used as is, or they can be updated and changed as your policy changes need or evolve over time. So when changing any variable in a math equation, testing needs to be part of that process. Same with audit rules. We're going to talk about testing in a little more detail, but we want to make sure that that is something you keep forefront of your mind as we move on.
All right, so here's a step-by-step on creating a custom audit rule. So step one, your name. You want to make sure it makes sense so that when you're looking for it in the future, you're able to find it from that name. You don't want to have to open up every single audit rule to figure out, okay, what is this audit rule actually doing? So you want to make that name make sense. Step two, the events. So this is different timings as to when the audit rule will apply. So your options are based on the allocation, entry, or report. So the audit rule will fire or flag when the item is either submitted or saved. For example, if it's on the entry, the flag will appear on the expense entry. If it's reports, the flag will appear on the report level. If allocation, the flag will appear at the allocation level. So if save or submit, this is when the audit rule will fire. So entry save, the flag will appear on the entry when save is clicked. Report submit, the flag will appear on the report when the submit button is submitted. So determining where and when you want the flag to appear is a really important part of the equation. Step three is the editable by. So this is noting which groups can edit the audit rule in the future. So typically this is set to global, and that's the most common, but you do have the ability to give access to specific groups. Step 4 is the applies to. This is where you select the group or groups that you want the rule to apply to. So for example, if you want this audit rule to apply globally, you'd select the global group. If you only want this audit rule to apply to a particular country or countries, then you would just select those countries that you want it to apply to. Then step 5. Step 5, when you're ready for this rule to be active, you want to make sure that this is set to yes. All active rules will fire. Any rule that's set to no will not fire. Then we get into the conditions of the audit rule and building those conditions. So A and C that's outlined here are parentheses. This is just like a math order of operation, PIM does. You start with the parentheses. So depending on the complexity of the rules, conditions, you may need to start with and end with a set of parentheses. So just like an equation, it tells the system which operations to consider together. Then we have B. B is a data object. The choices available here are based on the event that you chose on the previous page. So entry, report, allocation, etc. Then C. This is the field or value. So we select an item from the pane on the right side, which is the helper pane. The field options will depend on what you've chosen in the data object B. So for example, if you choose entry as your data object, you will get values related to the entry. So like expense type or amount. So basically the information that is available on the entry, if you choose report as the data object, you'll get values related to the report, like report submit or submitted by delegate. Then we have D. This is the operator. So it's another helper pane that will appear on the right-hand side with options like equal, not equal, greater than, less than, etc., depending on the field or value that you've selected previously. Then we have E. E is another data object. Again, the options that appear on the right helper pane are based on previous choices. So typically this just stays at value. Then we have F, which is another field or value field. This one corresponds with C. So think of this being C being the field name, and then F is the values of that field. So for example, we chose expense type in C, and F would give you the list of the actual expense types, such as lunch, airfare, etc. Then we have H. H is your and ors. So this is to be used if you have more than one condition needed in an audit rule. So this will join all of the multiple conditions together. So and, if you need both conditions to be met, or you use or if either condition can be met. So for example, expense types is breakfast and the amount is over 25, then you want to flag. But if your expense type is breakfast or lunch and my amount is over 20, then flag.
Perfect. So Tammy just went through a really good step-by-step process. So now that you've seen all of those different pieces, we're going to actually create an audit rule. We're going to put it into action. So we're going to begin with a basic airfare limit. So we're going to start with the entry amount being greater than $1,000. Then we're going to add that expense type. So now we have that and connector, and the entry expense type is equal to airfare. And third one is we are going to complete it with our best practice, which is personal expense do not reimburse, because in all honesty, do we really care if the user's not going to get reimbursed for it if they went over their limit? They're not asking for the money. So this is best practice, and I see it on many of the standard and predefined audit rules set up that way. So once you have those audit rules conditioned for the right situations, the last step to complete are the exceptions. And you can define which users see those generated exceptions or see those flags in the exception visibility field. There are options, combinations of 3 options basically. You've got the traveler, who is the end user submitting the expense report. You've got the employee, who is the one approving, or the approver, I'm sorry, who's the one approving the expense report, and then the expense processor, who is the back office person, that they usually review the expense report before its final approval. Sometimes you want everybody to see the exception, so you can train the employees on what they need to do, what's in policy. Other times, you don't want the end user to see it, or maybe you just need the approver and processor, like our previous example with once we add that comment, maybe the employee doesn't need to see it anymore because they did what they were supposed to do. And sometimes maybe you just need the processor to see it. Custom situations that require an additional audit on their part. It all depends upon what that audit rule is flagging, what it's firing for. The next piece is the exception code. And this is the unique code that's used to identify the audit rule. It's formatted in all uppercase, it's 8 characters long. Like Tammy mentioned earlier with the name, you want to make sure the code makes sense too. Because just like having to look at the name every time you're like, what does this do? If you have to look at the code, what does this do? So for the previous audit rule that we created, we could create a simple exception code like AIR LMT, air limit. And if it's grouped or a specific country, you could say add US at the end, or UK, or GL if it's global. You don't want to have to open every single audit rule to figure out what it does. And another really cool thing about the exception codes is you can use those codes within your workflow so that you can change those routing limits without having to go into your workflow every single time. So like our example, if we went from 1,000 is your airfare limit to now it's 1,200, you could just change the audit rule and not have to worry about the workflow. The exception level is kind of the fun part. I consider this kind of the severity of the audit rule. Does it require action, immediate action, or is it just kind of a nice friendly reminder? So we've got levels 1 through 98. It's what we call the yellow flags, the soft warnings, the soft stops. And that's generally a reminder or an FYI to the user. Level 99 is a red flag or a hard stop, Tammy mentioned earlier, where corrective action has to be taken before the expense report can be submitted. And in those situations, you want to ensure that the visibility that we talked about a second ago is set to all. Otherwise, the employees are not going to know why they can't submit their expense report. They need to see that hard stop rule. You can use various soft stop levels for different reasons, different reporting, different categorization, different workflow usages. Maybe you want all of your meal limits to be a level 24, and you want all of your audit rules that require your employees to add a comment as a level 51. So you've got those options, anywhere between 1 and 98. And then last but not least is the exception text. I feel like we're kind of drilling it in pretty hard, but you need to make sure this is clear too. This is something that your users or your approvers or your processors are going to see. So you want to make sure that that message tells them, what's the issue? Am I over the limit? What action do I need to take? Do you need to reduce the amount? Do you need to add a comment? Is it just a reminder, hey, in the future, don't do that, or you're not going to get reimbursed for this because you marked it as personal. There's a 255 character limit on the exception text. However, best practice, keep it short, keep it to the point. Just remember, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line.
So a great example of this, Sondra, is going back to that example that I gave of the rental car with fuel on the receipt. We started with that red flag, which was the level 99 hard stop. The employee saw that simple message that it's out of policy to fill up when you are returning the vehicle. You should do it beforehand. Please add a comment. And so once the employee adds that comment, we go ahead and clear that red 99 flag. They can submit that, but in the background, we've created another audit rule that's going to flag with a yellow flag, maybe that level 51 we were talking about because of a comment. And then we're going to set visibility so that it's just approver and processor that's now going to see that yellow flag. And the reason why is they now know the the employee was out of policy or didn't follow the policy, and that they bought the fuel at the rental car agency, and now they can review that comment and see why was policy not followed. Now, this is where they can decide to either approve or process or not this expense report. However, maybe there was a legitimate reason as to why, or maybe it's just time for a little chat. Right? I always like to say that, chat with your end users, to ask them, hey, what happened? But legitimate, maybe they would have missed their flight if they'd stopped at a gas station, or maybe their flight was late at night and it wasn't a safe area, so they needed to go ahead and refuel safely and not worry about that. So again, the end user, the processor knows what's happening and why.
Yep.
So when and in what situations should we use or add audit rules? So you do not want your users to be like a confused business guy over here and wondering when or how to do something. So this is when we use audit rules to let our users know things like what is or is not in policy, what is or is not compliant. Train them as they're doing their expense report. Use this information to maybe just give feedback or even a need to know. Maybe the policy did change. And it's like, hey, 25 was the meal limit, but now we've moved it to 30. Okay, the most important part or reason that you want to use audit rules is to correct issues or behaviors before they even submit that expense report, which in the long run, I loved these, it gives back time for your auditors and processors, that precious time. Right? Value-added activities can now be completed, which is really nice. So that is when you want to use them.
I always joke, it's always nicer to get it beforehand instead of having it go to audit and get it sent back.
I bet,
when you
yes.
could have just been told, hey, just add a comment for that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So then we have audit rule fatigue. So this refers to the exhaustion or frustration that individuals or teams experience when faced with the overwhelming number of audit-related tasks, checks, or compliance rules. So this fatigue often occurs when the rules are too frequent, complex, or repetitive, leading to a sense of being overwhelmed, disengaged, or desensitized. So as a result, the quality of work can decrease, and the focus on adhering to those rules might diminish, ultimately affecting the accuracy and effectiveness of the audits. This really pertains to a lot of the use of yellow flags, the soft stops. So if there are too many, employees get used to seeing them, and then they stop reading them entirely, and then because they know that they can still submit their expense report.
Exactly.
So other avenues that are available, so you can use expense type descriptions and or quick tips to help employees choose the correct expense types during the creation of their expense report. You can also require fields on forms instead of creating an audit rule to state that, for example, comments are needed. You can just make that comment field required on the form.
It's kind of like hitting that, are you sure you want to delete?
Right.
Yeah. Oh, shoot. So yeah, as we mentioned earlier, when you're creating audit rules or updating the predefined audit rules, or maybe updating a custom audit rule that you already have in place, it is best practice to test those rules. We always want to test. You want to make sure that the exception flag is firing in the right situation. Did this happen when it was supposed to? Does it display when you're expecting it? Is it happening only when that limit is exceeded, or only for the right groups, or only when the comment isn't there? But then you also want to make sure that it disappears when you're expecting it to, like when they add the comment to the car rental expense. And you want to make sure that it's not displaying when you don't want it to. So that can be another one of those causes for confusion, where the auditors just get fatigued because they have all these flags and they aren't even applying. So you want to make sure that they fire when they're supposed to, they go away when they're supposed to, and that they don't fire when they're not supposed to. So one simple tip I will add to that: if you are adjusting an audit rule that you have in place and it's already working and it's working correctly, or you're using one of the predefined ones, make a copy of it. So that way you can go back if you have to and make any changes. So that way the first one is still working can always rename it once it's all good. But then you can make the adjustments without having to go back and figure out what did I take off? What did I add? What did I put in there? And it's okay to fail a test once in a while. I learned that in calculus a couple times, honestly. It teaches you what you need to do the next time. Like you said, you got the formulas, just work in the formulas. So it's okay if it doesn't work the first time you do it. Try it again. Figure out what you missed, maybe forgot to put into, and fix those mistakes.
And now, Tammy, before we move to the next one thing I was just thinking of that popped into my head is when we were talking about the audit rule fatigue, is have you ever had a commute and you're on that road for 45 minutes to an hour, and then all of a sudden you get home and you're like, you pass stop signs and red lights, and you're like, I don't even remember passing these things, right?
I'm like, I got there somehow.
Yeah, that's what audit rule fatigue is like, right?
Exactly.
They start doing that same concept. So I just wanted to mention that, popped into my head.
Yeah. So we have definitely provided you with a lot of information today. A lot of steps, a lot of formulas to follow when creating and using those audit rules. And remember when we started and we had this audit rule feeling, just kind of being overwhelmed by this whole math logic. Hopefully.
Yeah, so hopefully you're feeling less overwhelmed now, and these audit rules are more like basic math. So 3 + 4 is 7.
And just like I learned in statistics, once you have a formula that works for what you're trying to do, so in this case, the audit rules, you know those step-by-steps that we've just provided and what each of those steps means, that it just becomes a little bit easier, and now you know, what am I trying to solve for? So just like that statistics paper, they gave me the formula, I knew if it was this kind of problem, I use this formula. We've given you those tips and those tricks and what each of those mean, and now you know what you're solving for, so you know how to write those. Audit rules can become much easier to navigate and to create. So like Sondra had said, make a copy of what is working and then go in and play. Have some fun with those, right? Enjoy them, see if they work, turn them on and test. If not, you have your existing first one to go back to and you can start over again.
Exactly.
So for additional support, we have linked some of the audit rule help pages here that you'll see. Those are hyperlinks in blue that we've covered today. They have all those little tips and tricks and what each of those meant that Tammy, the other Tammy, went over. And you can also use your QR code once you have this deck to go ahead and use your camera to go ahead and get those references as well, either that hyperlink or the QR code in order to get your resources that you need to help you continue on past today.
And before we wrap up, we wanted to share a friendly reminder that today you can make valuable connections with attendees and experts. So to connect with your peers, you can navigate to the chat with the attendees page. And if you have any outstanding questions for our team with attending the live event, click on the chat with experts to connect with solution advisors. And finally, don't forget to complete the survey for the session. We truly do value all the feedback that you share with us.
And we read them.
I was like, we read them all. Yep, exactly. So thank you very much for watching our session today.
And we hope that you feel prepared to go back and start creating audit rules on your own.
And we hope that you have enjoyed this session and any other virtual sessions that you may attend during this conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you.